Further to the video we made about it's important for people to know, particularly if someone's like younger and like was is I shouldn't even say younger. It goes. The people my age that perceive the same way. The guy who spoke this morning, they don't. He was a guy. He was a guy from the Brookings Institute, but like which is when people like did something bang. Does that bang about? I'm saying he didn't. It's the kind of thing. Well, no, it's important. You see, we don't. All these type of conservative think tanks and things. I mean, it's. They're certainly these aren't the good guys, okay? And they're not. I mean, we've made other videos about like the kinds of things that some of these outfits do, like Heritage and stuff, do studies on like why it's okay to take away people's food stamps. I mean, but it was a good example of like the thing is, but they do live in reality. It's just you can't picture why they're sort of like doing what they're doing. But the truth is, when he spoke, I mean, he told the truth. I mean, he told the truth. See, they don't think too much of politicians. So I wish there were none of these conservative think tanks. But then but they do. They don't have any respect for these Republican congressmen. And he told the truth, which is that what's going on now is that, and we said it before, but that this guy Rand Paul is going to do like a whole thing where he plays off the fact that people are sort of misinformed and like sort of fixated about something that isn't the problem and isn't and they don't really fully understand, but that there's a kind of there are even like conspiracy theory, what it passes for a conspiracy theory about it, but there's just a lot of misunderstanding of what the Federal Reserve Bank does. And he said, this guy Rand Paul is now gonna play on that, and he just sort of the subtext being like he shouldn't get away with this basically. But see, it's a conservative think tank. That's why it's it's not. I mean, he's saying it about. Wait, he didn't have to say. He's just telling. He's just explaining what the guy's trying to pull, what a politician's are trying to pull, who thinks he could run for president. But this is the kind of thing that the way people are misinformed. I mean, he could get away with it. What he wants to do but see, what I'm saying is even a conservative think tank calls it out. I mean, but then again, you run it for president, you do all kinds of, you have aspirations to be the president, you'll do any number of unreal things to play on the public. So he knows that people have particularly because of the internet, become very they think that the Federal Reserve Bank is sort of the source of a lot of problems. And the thing is, what we've said before, is that when they meet in front of Congress, I mean our print media and creates also false understandings of what the Federal Reserve does. I mean, but it's not. I mean, but to the point where they've somehow worked the Federal Reserve Bank into their nonsense, but this dangerous nonsense narrative of that the baby boom has and is passing on to their offspring, who are slightly younger than me, which is that they this whole liberal conservative thing and their culture war and all this nonsense that isn't real, but what they do is and you read op-eds where they talk about the woman they wanted to appoint. I think her name's Janet Yellen or something. Where they're talking about new Federal Reserve chairs, and there's op-eds saying whether the person is they're liberal or something, or they lean liberal instead of conservative. What does that have to do? What the narrative of liberal versus conservative is almost entirely just a narrative and doesn't really mean anything. But it's just that the baby boom generation and the newspapers and op-eds they read furthers that there's some kind of I don't know ideological or philosophical divide. It's all bullshit. But they even do it with something like the chairman of the Federal Reserve that, to say like, well, she says, she leans liberal. What does that have to do with what they're doing? I mean, it doesn't even, there's a place that left reality to like one more degree. Like, what? Not that it's real to begin with, but even if you were like sort of a liberal, so to speak, like, or a conservative in the sense that it means anything, what would that have to do with? You don't bring that to that can't be brought into what the Federal Reserve does, because what it does doesn't fall under the heading of that narrative, and that narrative isn't that real to begin with. So right, I mean, he's just saying that this guy from Brookings said, yeah, like, well, like, the Federal Reserve can do what it do, but this guy is now going to go out and create. It's more theater of the absurd. He wants to call them in front of Congress, and he wants to audit them. He's to do an audit of the Federal Reserve Bank, and then bring them to Congress and sort of suggest that. See, he wants what he's suggesting is it's not only that it couldn't happen, but it's logically impossible, but also it wouldn't make any sense and would be dangerous to give over. He's claiming that there could be a situation, but he can see the public would eat it up because they're misinformed. He's saying like, oh, your elected representatives should have control over monetary policy. That is, they don't have control over it, but the idea, do you want, like, I don't know, pick a congressman or senator on either side. You want like Dick Durbin deciding whether or not the banks should lower their reserve requirement? I mean, that's not only ridiculous. I mean, what is, you know what I mean? They set the Federal Reserve Bank sort of sets the rules for the other banks with regard to certain things, so they can like free up some money to lend, lowering the reserve requirement for a while, buying bonds from the banks, which puts cash in the banks. There's more money to lend. You want to hand that kind of thing over to the congressman who like. That doesn't even really make any sense. But the idea is apparently they're going to play on the public's, like, they're going to tell them things like, yeah, like you want your elected representatives to control, things like that, and monetary policy because why? I don't. It does. That's just it. It's nothing that makes sense or that would happen. But apparently, this guy and his wanting to run for president is going to play off people's phobias and misunderstanding of what the Federal Reserve does and its relationship to Congress when it testifies. And much of what happens when it testifies is meant psychologically. That is, like, the markets. The guy made a joke about it. He said, well, like, yeah, like the problem is, the guy from Brookings. He said, well, yeah, the problem is like what color socks Bernanke's wearing when he testifies has an effect on the markets. Like the statements they make about the little they can do to see if they could keep the economy chugging along a tiny bit. Is experienced by a part of the investor class as a signal of something, but that's that. But Rand Paul is now going to do some kind of stunt. He's going to do some kind of stunt that was going to play on the idea that people think. It's the same thing that guys. I used to make fun of a guy on a video where it's I could just tell it was some California 20-something living on a trust fund thought he'd make a cool video documentary and knows how to use all this computer equipment, and he's explaining that the Federal Reserve has authority over the government, that it has authority over the government, but it sounds right, because the senators and congressmen can't do things like lower the reserve requirements of the other banks, so the authority over the government, it doesn't even make any sense. But people are saying stuff like that, and it sounds like it might be all right. It's a private entity, and this and that, but instead of making a video saying there should be a national bank or something parallel to this bank, they're making people think all kinds of things about the Federal Reserve, and now this scumbag Rand Paul is going to use it to position himself as a big hero to run for president by doing another theater of the absurd. bringing the chairman of the Federal Reserve to Congress and suggesting something that would never happen, like the congressman making decisions like that about monetary policy in the banks. But no, he's going to get away with it. I mean, he's going to get away with a stunt like that. I mean, there should be no more congressmen like this.